So the Adobe Premiere Pro software can look somewhat daunting when you first open up the software, so we'll go through and give you an introduction to the workspace. First, we'll start with the taskbar at the top, of course familiar to anybody using any other application in macOS or in a Windows program. You have the taskbar at the top with multiple menu functions, starting with File, Edit, and then you have Clip, Sequence, Marker, Title, and Window. All of the options available and tools available to you in this software can be found within this taskbar. But of course, some of those tools also have a button here located in the workspace. Second thing I'll point out to you is the Adobe toolbar. If anybody has worked with another Adobe software, it's a familiar toolbar to you, but of course these are specific to editing the timeline in Adobe Premiere Pro. So you have selection tools, ripple edit, rolling edit, different slicing, pen tools, things like that to help you edit your timeline. One thing I will point out that we will actually mention a little bit later in another training is the sound meter here on the side. So this is actually showing you the sound output of the clips that you're working on, and that can be helpful to you when editing together multiple shots, especially if you're editing together a scene shot with multiple cameras. We'll discuss a little bit more about how to analyze and use the sound meters in a later training. When you're using the default workspace, you will have four primary panels. So starting up here in the upper left-hand corner, you have the source panel. So this is a panel where you can analyze the project that or the content that you currently have open and that you're working on for your video. So you load something into the source panel, you have the option to move through it, add markers, check the effects controls. There's actually now an audio mixer available in Adobe Premiere Pro, and of course a metadata tab. The second panel, just next to it, to the right, is the program panel. So this is showing you basically, as your video stands right now, here's what it will look like in its current form if you were to output it. So that is how you can identify any errors or any problems that you have in your video that you need to refine the edits on. Down here in the lower left corner, we have the project panel. So starting, of course, with the project bin you're familiar with from importing media from your laptop or from your computer's hard drive. You do have the media browser here as well. You want to be careful about importing media strictly from the media browser. Make sure you do move those files over into your project bin, because if you pull it right from the media browser and then move the file on your computer's hard drive, it's going to lose the pathway to that file, and you're going to lose the source, and you're going to not be able to view the video anymore in the program monitor. So make sure you're always putting any content that you'd like to use into your project bin. Of course, in this panel you do also have info, and you can see here that there's actually a rolling navigator bar. Because there are too many tabs in this panel, it's too small to see all the tabs. You actually have this bar that will scroll over to the side to show you the rest of the options in the panel. So you have effects, markers, and of course history that shows you the changes that you've made to your project. And then, of course, on the bottom right-hand side, we have the timeline. So this is where you're basically building your project and stacking the various video clips together and making all of your refined edits with the tools here. Something that's very important to working in the software is making sure that you have the right selection for what you're working on. So you can kind of see right now, I have the timeline selected, and you can tell that by seeing that there is an orange box around that timeline. So that's what I'm working on, and that's what the tools will work for. So if you kind of scroll up through here, you'll see that some of these options are grayed out. I can no longer use those options. It's because I have the timeline selected and it's not a tool for the timeline. However, if I click on the project panel, same thing's going to occur. There are now things that only work for the project panel, but you can see that orange highlighted box coming around the panel. If you want to make adjustments to the workspace, you can certainly do that. This is, of course, the default layout, so this is what you're going to see if you start the program for the first time, but you might find that you have a need or a desire to change how the software looks when you're working in it. So you have the option, there's actually grab handles on each of these panels in the corner, so you can actually grab that and change where you want it to be. So we'll start with the program panel, and we'll just see that I can actually make that kind of front and center of the software. So there's different options of where I can place it. I'm going to go ahead and drop it into the center just to show you that that will merge everything on that top section. So now my source panel is over here, and within that same tab bar, I have my program panel down here at the end. There are, of course, you can restore it back to its original form by moving it here, putting it in that blue box on the side. You can certainly stack these however you want, but realize that sometimes the orientations aren't necessarily going to be very useful for your editing process. And of course, you can kind of just drag and adjust the size of these as well if you'd like to see this a little bigger, or perhaps you want your timeline to be a bit larger. You can drag that over to the side, kind of shrink your project panel out of the way. So feel free to make comfortable changes to the software layout, whatever works best for you for your editing. Keep in mind that selections are very important. If you ever get stuck, just ask yourself, do I have the right things selected, and move from there. And of course, if you're looking for something you can't find, remember that typically you're going to find it in the window panel or another one of these menus at the top.